There used to be a time where All-Star Week was something that fans looked forward to, but over the years, fans' declining interest can be attributed to what it feels like an infinite amount of reasons. Join me as we take a deep dive into how every year the All-Star Game and Home Run Derby seemingly just get worse and worse. Let's start this off with the Home Run Derby. The 2024 Home Run Derby drew its lowest audience viewership since 2014. Between ESPN and ESPN2, they had a combined draw of 5.45 million viewers. This is not great news for obvious reasons. If you don't remember that 2014 Derby that we're comparing this to, it had its own fair share of issues, mainly that it had to deal with an hour-long rain delay. Just think about that for a moment. The 2014 Derby had better viewership with an hour-long rain delay over the 2024 Derby starting on time. So let's break down how MLB just can't seem to get the Home Run Derby right. It feels like the more they try to do to save it, the worse it gets. Now, I'm not going to be one to complain in this video without providing solutions, so that's how this format will go. For every problem we deep dive into, I'll be providing a fix for each. Problem number one is the lack of star power. MLB needs the stars that it promotes the most to be a part of the Home Run Derby. For example, if you spend any time on Instagram, you know that MLB posts basically every single home run that Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Yordan Alvarez, Bryce Harper, and Elly De La Cruz hits. Yet not a single one of them participated in this year's Home Run Derby. Now, you can say that we still got to see some of the top leaders in home runs participating, like Marcell Ozuna, Gunnar Henderson, and Jose Ramirez. Isn't that enough? Well, yes and no. What MLB is dealing with here is a two-pronged issue. Although those players that I just named are producing big home run numbers, the problem is because MLB doesn't market them to the public as hard as the first batch of names I mentioned, there's no name recognition from anyone besides hardcore fans and viewership goes down. There are a few reasons behind why the biggest names choose to not participate. The first reason is there simply just isn't enough incentive to overrule the fear of injury. There is a perception that the intense swinging required can lead to injuries and fatigue. Players and the teams they play for may be concerned about the Home Run Derby curse, where their performance may decline in the second half of the season due to changes in swing mechanics for the Derby. Additionally, with the All-Star break being the only substantial mid-season rest period, players just prefer to take advantage of it and rest. I mean, think about it. When you're a star player, you're going to be playing close to 162 games, and this might be the only time you get the rest you need without taking days off when your team needs you. So how does MLB fix this? Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. MLB would need to negotiate with the players via the CBA that if they're in the top 8 in home run leaders going into the All-Star break, they must compete in the Derby. That way, throughout the first half of the season, MLB can organically promote those who are hitting the most home runs, and it'll build up hype along the way. And by the time the Home Run Derby comes, those players would have been promoted enough to fans where they would be a familiar face and name anyway. Now let's talk Derby incentives. According to the 2023 collective bargaining agreement, the winner receives $1 million, second place gets $500,000, and the 6 other players get $150,000. Plus, whoever hits the furthest home run wins an additional $100,000. But evidently, these financial incentives set by MLB aren't enough to consistently entice its biggest stars to want to participate. So ultimately, MLB would have to figure out additional incentives to weigh out the reasons why their top stars and performers don't want to join in the first place. The Home Run Derby's second major issue is the over-commercialization of the event. It just feels like we're constantly being bombarded by sponsors and commercials over the course of 3 hours, and it does get a bit tired. The solution to this? Calm down with the commercials. I know that will never happen, but it is what it is. Before we jump into the All-Star Game's problems, we'll tackle the most glaring issue with the Home Run Derby, the format. At this point, I wholeheartedly believe that MLB is convinced the fans won't like it unless the rules and format are as confusing as possible. The Home Run Derby, in essence, should be fairly straightforward. But today, we have themed rounds, specific distances for bonus home runs. Sometimes the timer is on, sometimes it's not, and head-to-head rounds, but only sometimes depending on the round. That sound confusing confusing at all? Yeah, I know. So let's go over the format changes and how it's gotten worse over time despite fan feedback making it clear as to what we want to see. The most popular format that fans loved is the 10-out format. For those of you who don't know what that is, it was pretty simple. If a player hit a ball and it wasn't a home run, it was an out. And if you did that 10 times, you're done. This was the case from 1991 to 2005. 8 to 10 players were selected to hit as many home runs as they possibly could before 10 outs were made. There was also no carryover into the next rounds. Whatever home runs you hit in that round stayed in that round. From 2006 to 2013, a new format change was implemented. Everything stayed the same, except this time home run totals carried over before it reset to 0 in the final round. So players with the highest totals between round 1 and 2 would make it to the finals. And then 2014 came. This is when MLB decided to significantly change the format, and this is where things started to go downhill. MLB thought the Derby was taking way too long, so they decided to figure out ways to speed it up. There was a new bracket-style format where 5 players from each league faced each other. There was now only 7 outs to make versus 10, and the top hitter in each league with the highest home run count would receive a second round bye. Round 3 would feature the winners from round 2, who would then face the round 1 bye winners. Caught all that so far? This format only lasted this 1 year. This new format change took place in 2015 and lasted until 2023. Because absolutely nobody asked, MLB completely removed the outs per round. This was replaced with a time limit. Depending on home run distance, players can also receive bonus time in the last minute of each round. During that time, the clock would stop for each home run and would not restart until a swing does not result in a home run. Additionally, this was the first year head-to-head bracket-style seeded matchups were introduced. But ultimately what happened here is the time limit resulted in players just swinging as quickly as possible to launch as many home runs as possible. This created 2 problems for fans. The first problem was that nobody could focus on one particular homer because players would be swinging at a second ball while the first ball was still in the air. For example, in the final seconds of the 2018 Home Run Derby, Bryce Harper was just swinging like a madman trying to win it all, and it worked out for him. This turned into seeing how many manic home runs could be hit in a small amount of time, versus marveling at Major League moonshots, which is the heart and soul of the Home Run Derby. The second problem the time limit rounds caused was if a player wasn't getting enough home runs, that now caused fans to blame a player's Derby pitcher, that in which each player selects anyway. Fans and the media would blame Derby pitchers for things like pitching way too slowly and not throwing enough pitches in their batter's wheelhouse, completely taking away the power from the players we all tuned in to see and creating the narrative of, I hope so-and-so's pitcher is fast and accurate enough. But MLB didn't stop there. They would change the format again and again almost every year. Even with the time limit rounds, they believed that it was still taking way too long. In 2015, due to weather concerns, there was a reduction in time by 1 minute from 5 minutes to 4 minutes. The clock wasn't stopped in the final minute this time around, and 1 minute of bonus time would be granted if a player hit 2 home runs that went 425 feet or more. In 2016, 4-minute round lengths were made permanent. Each player was granted 1 timeout during each round and 2 timeouts during the final round. The minute of bonus time was then reduced to just 30 seconds, and it now needed a player to hit at least 2 home runs 440 feet versus the year prior's 425 feet. In 2021, MLB decided the Home Run Derby was still too long. The time limit per round was reduced to 3 minutes. A bonus time of 30 seconds would be awarded if a player hit a home run over 475 feet versus the 440 feet that it used to be. Then, in 2022, the rules reverted to where the additional bonus time needed 2 home runs at 440 feet or more. On top of that, now, moving forward, if an all-star game is tied after 9 innings, there would be a second home run derby to determine which league wins. Each manager must pick 3 players, there's no time limit, and each player would just have 3 swings. Whatever league hits the most home runs wins. This now brings us to 2024, where the rules were changed yet again. The first round is no longer a bracket-style round. On top of that, players have 3 minutes or 40 pitches, which puts even more pressure on batter and pitcher sync. Players get 1 30-second timeout. After the initial 3 minutes are over, they then go into an untimed bonus period where they can hit as many home runs as possible before making 3 outs. Anything that isn't a home run is an out, and if they hit a ball more than 425 feet, they get an additional out to use. Next, in the second round, it returns to a bracket-style head-to-head format based on their performance in round 1. The final round is then a time limit of 2 minutes or 27 pitches. This has gotten far too complicated. I mean, what are we doing here? What are we doing? The Home Run Derby should not have an endless list of rules where said rules need to be constantly explained to the fans, because if they aren't, nobody will have any clue as to what is actually going on or what they're even watching. But I digress. It should just be as simple as 10 outs, watch moonshots, whoever hits the most round after round wins. Done. But this goes to show that MLB has no idea what to do with this anymore, and even fan complaints and feedback falls on deaf ears. 2020 could have been a perfect time for MLB to get real weird with it. With no fans in the stands, they could have just picked a day, given players metal bats, and had them go nuts with it. But yes, I know that it was already a tight season with a 60-game schedule that started in late July, but I still think it would have been a great opportunity to just do something different. Although 2024 is closer to what fans have been asking for, and the feedback has been generally positive from what I've seen with the 2024 rule changes, I still think that MLB can do much better than this. And viewership and ratings would agree. Also, let's be real, there was nothing better than throwing the Home Run Derby on and hearing Chris Berman's play-by-play. He had so many legendary taglines during his tenure with ESPN, but just hearing back, gone with how hyped he would get would just make you hyped alongside with him.
There's the winner! Look at that! Back! God!
And I gotta say, the whole production from start to finish just falls flat these days. Before we move forward, I'd like to take a moment to try and save you some money. Shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring. You can use promo code JabroniBaseball to get $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek is the official ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. You can use SeatGeek for sports, concerts, music festivals, Broadway shows, comedy shows, and more. Again, my viewers get $20 off their first purchase with code JabroniBaseball. That's one word, all caps. Click the link in the description to download the app. Alright, now, let's get into whatever the All-Star Game has become at this point. Let's talk about the main positive here. There is no doubt that MLB's All-Star Game is the best when compared to the NBA's All-Star Game, the NHL All-Star Game, and the NFL Pro Bowl. I think the main reason here is clear. The competitive intensity appears to be the closest to what fans see in the regular season and in the postseason. I mean, who are we kidding? Especially the Pro Bowl and the NBA All-Star Game at this point have become an absolute joke. However, there has been some criticism that the competitive intensity of the MLB All-Star Game has gone down ever since 2017, when home field advantage for the World Series was no longer determined by the winner of the Midsummer Classic. But damned if you do, damned if you don't. Many fans hated the fact that the All-Star Game ever determined the World Series home field advantage, and that was in effect from 2003 to 2016. But ultimately, there are lower stakes now. How does MLB fix this? Unfortunately, there really is no way to force players to play harder if they don't want to take the All-Star Game as seriously as a regular season game or a postseason game. There could be some incentives based on performance within the game, but other than that, there isn't much else that can be done without pushing huge consequences like World Series home field advantage. The next thing that is definitely worse is the uniforms. From 1934 to 2019, both leagues' players would wear their team's uniforms for the All-Star Game, and it was awesome. Talk about a perfect way to market both your players and your teams. You would know immediately what player was playing and what team they were from. However, if it's not broke, it's time for MLB to fix it. As we all know, MLB signed a $10 billion uniform deal with Nike and Fanatics in 2019, and so far, it's gone just incredible, hasn't it? After the 2020 All-Star Game was canceled due to it being a cursed year, things would change. Both teams would now wear an American League and National League uniform for the All-Star Game. Those uniforms were typically reserved for promotional use, and the players in the Home Run Derby would use them. The real downfall began in 2021 during the All-Star Game in Colorado. For the first time in American League history, and the first time since 1933 in National League history where they wore National League uniforms for that All-Star Game, things would change. 2021 featured these uniforms, which screams graphic design is my passion. Just a truly bizarre looking choice, but at least the players' teams' logos were on their chests, so you you can kind of see what team they play on. The 2022 game in Los Angeles then did these, which are just each team's regular uniforms but in gray or white with gold letters and numbers. We then got these gems in 2023 for the game in Seattle, which made it absolutely impossible to tell the team that any player played on unless you zoomed into their hat or right arm sleeve. Which then brings us to the 2024 All-Star Game in Texas that brought us these god-awful uniforms, where again, the players' team logos are either on their hat or on one sleeve. Fans and players have made it abundantly clear that we don't want this, nor was this something that anybody asked for. Even a superstar like Bryce Harper said he loved watching All-Stars take the field in their team uniforms, saying if he could change back to that, I think it'd be really cool. And I gotta agree with him. Mark Melanson said that it's kind of boring, I don't like it, I like to see everybody's personal uniforms, show all the team's different colors, I'm not sure why they went this route. Justin Turner sounded off on the change as well, saying I don't know if I'm necessarily in love with that. To wear a Dodger uniform on the field for an All-Star game, it's something to be proud of. Angels manager at the time, Joe Madden, was not a fan of this change either, saying that he loved the tradition of players lining up for introductions in their team's uniforms. A few Dodgers standing together, later a few Padres, and so on. There's a lot of great things to be done marketing-wise, but we can market tradition too. A lot of people don't know this, but in 2003, MLB toyed with the idea of All-Stars wearing NL and AL uniforms, but they would eventually not go through with it. Jason Giambi was really critical of this at the time, saying that he really didn't like the idea, calling it stupid. It's just stupid. It's just another stupid idea. Fans want to see the players in their own uniforms. I can't say I disagree with any of those assessments. In fact, it has been reported that MLB did not consult with players at all about this change. They put their complete trust in Nike and Fanatics, who, let's be real, will manufacture as many different uniforms as possible to make as much money as possible. The MLB chief revenue officer said it was all about harnessing Nike's expertise in reaching younger audiences and in sport. If anything at this point, it's definitely clear to say that Nike, Fanatics, and MLB have gotten significantly worse press and fan feedback on uniforms across the board in general. And the All-Star Game is no different. It's been mainly negative feedback with those uniforms. In fact, I've been able to find almost no positive feedback whatsoever on those All-Star Game uniforms. The solution to this problem? Easy. MLB just needs to listen to their fans and players to bring back team uniforms for the All-Star Game instead of yet again, similar to the Home Run Derby, making things way more complicated than it has to be. However, I will give credit to where it's due. There's no change made yet, but Rob Manfred has said that he's heard the feedback and they are potentially looking into changes in the future. The third issue, similar to the Home Run Derby, is a participation issue. From 1933 to 1946, the All-Star Game manager selected the entire lineup. However, in 1947, MLB allowed fans to select the starting lineups via mail-in vote. This worked for about 10 years. In 1957, Reds fans completely stuffed the ballot, electing 7 Reds and Stan Musial. This made MLB Commissioner Ford Frick replace Wally Post and Gus Bell with Willie Mays and Hank Aaron. Additionally, the commissioner gave full power of lineup selections to players, managers, and coaches because of this. Then, starting again in 1970, fans were allowed to select the starting lineup except for the pitcher. To this day, the starting pitcher is selected by the managers. Starting in 2002, each team's managers worked with the commissioner's office to select 5 nominees for fans to vote on the final roster spot. This was called the All-Star Final Vote. To break it down, it's pretty simple. Fans would vote for the final roster spot on each team, but in 2019, MLB discontinued this final vote. In 2003, players were allowed a player ballot to elect a reserve for each position in addition to 5 starters and 3 relievers. Players were also allowed to vote for coaches and managers across both leagues as well. The issue since then is not that much different than what happened in 1957. Fans of certain teams will stuff the vote. We've seen it time and time again. This leads to teams from other fan bases feeling like either A, a deserving, well-performing player on another team will get snubbed, and B, it stops the variety of the All-Star Game to the point where it feels like you're just watching most of one team's roster. MLB can fix this easily by having a stat threshold on players who are eligible to be voted on, in addition to better monitoring of the email voting system for spam. MLB should really not allow one fan base to outweigh the other 29 because that one fan base collectively decided it so. It really takes away from the point of the All-Star Game to showcase the game's best, not just the most popular from a particular franchise. The next issue we're going to tackle here is probably why it feels like it's not as good as it used to be. One word: scheduling. The All-Star Game used to be a time where you would see players go against each other that normally wouldn't. That novelty has worn off completely at this point. With the implementation of interleague play, we got to see what only the World Series and the All-Star Game used to bring us now on a regular basis. It started off small, but now with the scheduling changes in 2024, every team will face each other at least once during the regular season. Because it's so normalized, it's just not as exciting to watch anymore. Can you imagine if interleague play didn't involve every single team playing each other at least once a season? And now, the only time you might ever get to see a phenom with the hype of Paul Skeens face Aaron Judge, for example, would be the All-Star Game or the World Series, or once every 2 or 3 years that it used to be, where the Yankees and Pirates would face each other. People would absolutely tune in just for that matchup alone. Honestly, there's no way to fix this unless the scheduling is fixed. The novelty of certain players only facing each other during the All-Star Game, the World Series, or at the very least once every few years would need to come back. The final issue is marketing. MLB absolutely has a marketing issue with its players. With the advent of social media, it should be easier to market your players more. However, MLB chooses the strange path of only marketing a small handful of players over and over and over again. This may work in the short term for engagement, but when it comes to the All-Star Week time, this is why they're running into the issue of fans and casuals not really knowing too much about each player participating. When you go on any post about Shohei Ohtani, for example, especially on Instagram, you can scroll to a never-ending degree to where the majority of comments accuse MLB of glazing. This became very apparent over the years. There was one instance in 2022 where Jonah Heim hit his first major league grand slam. It was off Shohei Ohtani, and MLB did not post or talk about it once on social media. I remember there were plenty of comments telling MLB to post the Jonah Heim grand slam, but to nobody's surprise, even with fans asking, they did not. This could have been a great way for MLB to promote one of its rising stars in Heim, who became an all-star the very next year, but because it made Shohei look bad, they didn't. And I gotta say, there have been many times where in a single day, I'll see MLB post anything Shohei, even non-baseball. Don't believe me? Well, I looked into it. These range from promoting a signature shoe collection to a picture of him and his father for Father's Day, him and his mother on Mother's Day, him on the cover of GQ, pictures of him meeting celebrities, congratulating him on getting married, wishing him a happy birthday, or just pictures of him standing around. No other player in baseball is awarded this type of promotion from MLB. This almost backfired on them when the gambling issues with his interpreter came out because MLB basically put all of their eggs in one promotional basket. If Shohei was arrested or banned from MLB, they basically lost the player they promoted the most and essentially would have to start from square one on who to promote next. I believe the smart thing to do would be to promote as many players as you can equally, just in case something like that were to happen. Your sport from a face perspective can rebound easier. How terribly they market their players eventually catches up at the All-Star Game. Sure, everyone will tune in to see Shohei because that's the #1 player you promote. However, when he gets taken out in the 3rd inning for a replacement at the All-Star Game, it leaves especially the casual fan, who is the lifeblood of any product, wondering what and who they're watching anymore. The easy way to fix this? Promote more players equally and don't put all of your eggs in one basket with a few players. It almost backfired terribly this year, and it could again in the future. Today, the Home Run Derby and All-Star Game feel like they get more bad press than good. From the jerseys to All-Star snubs, star player participation issues, and really, really bad national anthem renditions. All press should not be considered good press, and unless MLB starts listening to fans and its very own players who combined make the sport what it is, the All-Star Game and Home Run Derby will continue to just get worse and worse. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps me and the channel out a ton. I'm also now on X at Jabroni Baseball, so you can follow me there and we can talk more baseball. What are your thoughts? What could MLB do differently? What do you like and dislike about the current formats? Sound off in the comments below. I'll catch you in the next video. Later.